Hi, in this video we'll be continuing with the, the C# video tutorials. So in this video itself, we'll be doing the plus and so basically the increment and decrement operators. So what are the increment and decrement operators? So let's just talk about those. So we'll just start some notes down here. So the increment operator is just plus like that, and the decrement operator is just minus like that. So let's just talk about that basically. So we'll just expand on it. So to increment a variable means to increase its value, and to decrement a variable means to decrease its value. So C# provides special operators to increment and decrement variables. It's the same in other languages such as Java. I don't think you can do it in Python, but you can do it in C. Pretty much that's it for now that we've talked about on the channel so far. And Android, well, basically we use Java to code Android, and the Android docs itself allows for plus and minus. I believe in Kotlin as well, but it does work. So plus itself is just, so let's just pretend we have, let's just say we have a val. Let's just say int val points to 0. So we can say val plus, which would mean that val points to val plus 1. So it's pretty much the same as, val points to val plus 1. It's also the same as val plus equals 1. So it's the same thing. So basically, to increment a variable means to increase its value, and to decrement a variable means to decrease its value. So we already talked about that already. So both the following statements, basically the following statements I have here, val plus is the same as val points to val plus 1, and it's the same as val plus equals 1. So incrementing and decrementing is so commonly done in programs such as C#. So much that C# provides a set of simple unary operators designed just for incrementing and decrementing variables. So these are the ones we just talked about, pretty much plus and minus. So we actually haven't, so that's, yeah, so pretty much the same thing here. The statement uses the plus operator to add 1 to num. So that's right here, num plus, sorry, not num, val, so val plus, which is the same as all these three. So on the flip side, obviously, val minus is the same as val points to val minus 1, or val minus equals 1. So same thing. So the plus operator and the minus operator, that's the correct Microsoft actual terminology for it, or for them. So the expression num plus is not, oh sorry, not val plus is just val plus. So there's things to watch out for that we've talked about in C, which can be confusing. So basically, So this way to write it is called postfix mode or notation. So this is called postfix mode, which means pretty much val plus plus, because it comes post, which means after the variable. And then there's also prefix mode, which is called or basically it's just plus plus val, like that. So there's a difference between the two, which can be confusing, and you will get tested on that in university, so just be careful. The best way to learn this is to use the debugger, so we'll try to do an example in the debugger at some point. So when you write a simple statement to increment or decrement a variable, such as the ones that we just described, it doesn't matter if you use prefix mode or postfix mode. The operators do the same thing, but however, if you write statements that mix these operators with other operators or with other expressions, there could be a difference. I believe basically one just increments later on for the next time you call the variable, and the other one would increment before, like basically as the variable is called. So we'll try to show that example. So let's see what else we have here. So such complex code can be difficult to understand. When we use the increment and decrement operators, we will do so only in ways that are pretty much just easy to understand, such as statements previously shown. So we introduce these operators at this point because they are commonly used in loops. So you can use these to have your condition of a for loop, which we'll talk about coming up. So we can have another example here where a variable is initialized to the value 1. The while loop that begins iterates as long as count or val is less than or equal to a certain number. The next statement increments the variable, the counter variable. So we can just do an example here, down here. So say example 2. So let's just say we have an int val points to 1. So we'll say while val is less than or equal to 10. And we'll call a message box, so message box dot show. So like a dialog box will pop up, like a pop-up window. We'll say message box dot show, and then we'll just print a string. And then below here, instead of saying count, or sorry, not count, val points to val plus 1. So you could say that. You could say val plus equals 1. Or you could say, in this case, val plus plus. So it's up to you. Sometimes I go for the val plus plus, or I'd go for val points to val plus 1. Sometimes val plus plus is just easier, it's quick, so it's up to you what you want to do. That's pretty much it. They didn't discuss too much here. I think perhaps the prefix and postfix notation might be too advanced to talk about at this point, because we haven't really covered everything else, so we'll probably come back to this later on. So in that case, let's jump into the for loop here. So now the next set of notes here. So the for loop You may have seen me use it before. It's pretty easy to use. I'd rather use for out of while or do while. Sometimes you need to use a while, sometimes you need to use a for, it just depends. Most of the time I try to use a for if I can. So the for loop is ideal for performing a known number of iterations. So the for loop is specifically designed for situations requiring a counter variable to control the number of times the loop iterates. So when you write a for loop, you specify 3 actions. So these actions you might get tested on. So these are initialization, so this action takes place when the loop begins. So it happens only once. So the next one is, so let me just go with 1, 2, 3 here because there's 3 things to remember for this. So the first one is initialization, the second one is test. So test is a Boolean expression is tested. If the expression is true, the loop iterates. Otherwise, the loop stops. And number 3 is update. So this action takes place at the end of each loop iteration. So those are the 3 things to remember for the for loop. It's kind of confusing to remember all of them, but you just have to remember it. So the general notation of the for loop is for initialization expression, semicolon, test expression, semicolon, and then update expression. Then you'll open some square brackets or curly braces, then you'll say statement. However many statements you want, statement, 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 and so on. That's the general notation. Just have to kind of just know, maybe you create an acronym for this, like ITU, and then this, you don't really need to know this part that well. Just kind of need to know how to code it. You don't really need to know the general notation. So the statements that appear inside the curly braces are the body of the loop, so we know that. So these are the statements that are executed each time the loop iterates, as with other control structures. So let me just talk about this myself. So let me just tell you guys how it really works. So here you could just have example, whatever this is, 2 for loops. So you could say for. You can initialize something here. So for example, usually you say I with your first variable in your for loop. Second one you'd use J. If you need a third one, you could use K. But I just usually use I and J. So first one I'll say I. So int I points to 0, then you'll say I is less than. For example, val. Then we'll say I plus plus. So basically that's just saying for I points to 0, I is less than val, I plus plus. So let's just say val points to whatever, some number. So let's just pick a random number. So whatever number that is. So I is going to start at 0, I is going to be less than this number, then I is going to increment by 1. So when the loop starts, I is going to point to 0. Now you exit, so once you get to the bottom bracket of the loop, then you loop back up to the top here, check the condition again. So in this case, when you get up here, it's going to increment before it steps in. That's the part you have to remember. So now I is going to point to I plus 1. So I is going to be 1. So while I points 0, I is basically 1 is less than this number. I plus plus, so it's going to continue till until basically I is less than this number. So once I is equal to this number, then the loop will exit. So that's pretty much how it works. So hopefully that makes sense. I'd say it's the most advanced loop out of them all. But pretty much we'll do some more examples coming up here. So basically that's just how you really use it. The curly braces are optional if the body of the loop contains only one statement. So again, you can just remove the braces if you just have one statement in the loop. So it's pretty much that. So the first line of the for loop is the loop header. So you may see that word. After the keyword for, there are 3 expressions inside the parentheses. Excuse me, so separated by semicolons. So the first expression is the initialization expression. It is normally used to initialize a counter variable to its starting value. So this is the first action performed by the loop, and it is done only once. The second expression is the test expression. This is a Boolean expression that controls the execution of the loop. As long as this expression is true, the body of the for loop will repeat. The for loop is a pretest loop, so let's make a note of that here. Just down here, something to remember. So for loop is a pretest loop. I think while loop is as well. The other one that isn't is a do while. That's a post-test loop. Sorry, just lost where I was here. Okay, so the for loop is a pretest loop, so it evaluates the test expression before each iteration. The third expression is the update expression. It executes at the end of the iteration. Typically, this is a statement that increments the loop's counter variable. So you can see some advanced for loops. This is just your kind of common one. You may see more advanced stuff in here. Sometimes you could have different things like method calls or some other random things. You'll know when you see it. Like you could have a method in here that's like calculate val or something. You could pass in I, and that I could be like returning a value less than this number. So you could see some more advanced things with it. You may see some, we'll probably do some kind of examples like that coming up later on. So once again, first you perform, well, we already kind of went over it, so don't really need to do that again. So let's do an actual example here. Actually, maybe we'll do that one. Okay, still got a bit here, still a bit more time here. So we have pretty much a GUI. I don't think we really need to. We could just say, pretend that we have a list box. So let's assume that we have a list box. So let's just go with this here. So let's just say we assume a list box. Assume list box called output list box. And let's just say we have a button called OK button or whatever, like that. So let's just pretend we have example 3 or whatever. So let's say we have a private void OK button underscore click. We'll pass in object sender, comma event args e. So basically this is just an event handler. It's going to handle so it's an event handler, and it handles the OK button click. So when someone clicks the button, the OK button is going to handle that. So in that handler, so we'll say we'll have a local constant. So we'll say constant int max val points to like some number. Then we'll say you'll have a local a local variable as well. So you could say int val here. And we can have our for loop here. We can say while val points to 1, val is less than or equal to max val plus plus. Then we'll enter the body of the loop, and then we'll say we'll call our list box here output list box dot items dot add. We'll pass in a parameter here. We'll pass in a string. We'll say we'll just say let's just say the square of so we'll pass in val, so we'll say the square of plus, so we'll concatenate the string, plus val plus is plus val times val. So that's pretty much it. So every time you click the button, what's going to happen? So every time you click the button, then it's going to define this local constant, then define this local variable. You'll have a loop here, basically, which will iterate until basically until the number that we chose was 100. So val points to 1, val is less than 100. We could have had another condition here. Sorry, max val is 100, val is initialized to 1 down here. It's firstly it's initialized to 0. right? Then we initialize it, we then point it to 1 after that. So basically what's going to happen is that the list box is going to add the square of val is 1 times 1, 2 times 2, it's going to do that till 100. So it's just going to print that string out 100 times. Maybe 101 in this case. That list box, imagine a list box getting full of 101 strings. So that's pretty much what's going to happen. So that once again the for loop is a pre-test loop. Because the for loop tests its Boolean expression before it performs an iteration, it is a pre-test loop. So it's possible to write this loop so that it never iterates. For example, we could have said that this value is like 102. Therefore, since val points to 102, val is not less than max val, which is 100. Therefore, it would never enter the loop. Therefore, the loop would just get skipped. So hopefully that makes sense. So I think that's pretty much it. We'll probably run this into part 2 because we'll have to talk about, there's more to talk about. So thanks for watching, guys. If you guys liked the video, you can like and subscribe to the channel to support the channel. And in the next video, we'll be talking about declaring the counter variable in the initialization expression. So it's pretty much what I already did, but we'll talk about that later on. I think I did it up here for int I points to 0. And we'll continue on with other forms of the update expression, so perhaps other examples of for loops. So thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care.